This is Alex Mercer on WNXR, cutting into every scheduled program across the nation, because what I am about to say is not rumor, not speculation, not another internet-fueled panic. It is official. The President has addressed the nation moments ago and confirmed that the beings responsible for the global attacks, the disappearances, the strange shapes reported moving across rooftops and tearing through defense lines, are not human. They are not the result of a rival nation's technology or a scientific experiment gone wrong. They are an extraterrestrial species, one the government has known about for decades under the code name Raptoids. The weight of that word almost refuses to settle in my mind, even as I repeat it. For years, our world debated the existence of life beyond our atmosphere. Tonight, that question is no longer academic. These creatures are here, invasive, coordinated, and they have begun their assault with terrifying precision. As I speak, major cities across multiple continents are reporting catastrophic losses. Emergency channels are overwhelmed. Entire regions have gone silent. The President's voice, which we managed to record earlier, was raw with fear, something I never thought I would hear from the highest office in this country. He admitted the truth bluntly. The government underestimated the Raptoids, underestimated their intelligence, and failed to prepare for a day they long insisted would never come. He said communication networks may fail entirely within hours. He said some urban centers may already be compromised beyond rescue. He urged the public not to panic, but even here in the studio, the atmosphere is cracking under the pressure of everything happening at once. Staff members are whispering, some are crying, others are frozen in place, trying to process that the world as they knew it has just collapsed in on itself. Outside these walls, I can hear chaos building, a rising wave of confusion, fear, and disbelief sweeping through the streets like wildfire as people try to make sense of the impossible. Reports coming in from the East Coast describe towering silhouettes moving between skyscrapers, shadows slipping through smoke and fire as people flee in every direction. There are unconfirmed accounts of coordinated attacks on power grids, transportation hubs, and military installations. Every minute brings new fragments of information, most of them grim, many of them too frightening to repeat without verification, though the silence from some of our usual contacts speaks louder than any report could. What I can tell you with certainty is that humanity is facing something it has never faced before. This is not a storm we can wait out. This is not a conflict we can rationalize or predict. We are up against a species whose motives we do not understand, whose technology surpasses what we once believed possible, and whose appearance on Earth has shattered every illusion of safety we ever held. I do not know how long we will remain on the air. I do not know how long any of us will have access to reliable communication. But as long as this station remains operational, as long as I can speak into this microphone and reach even one person still listening, I will continue to report whatever I can. Hold on to each other. Stay alert. Seek shelter. Do not approach anything unfamiliar, no matter how still it seems. And above all, believe what you are hearing. The world has changed in a single night, and none of us will emerge from it the same. I can only hope that when the dust settles, there will be a world left to rebuild. This is the emergency alert system broadcasting on all available frequencies. Citizens of every region, if you can hear this transmission, stop what you are doing and listen carefully. Moments ago, military tracking stations confirmed multiple unidentified craft entering Earth's upper atmosphere at extraordinary speeds. These objects were first detected beyond our satellite grid, moving in patterns no known aircraft can replicate. Radar operators attempted to classify them, but their signatures overloaded multiple systems simultaneously. We have now confirmed that these are not meteors, not experimental aircraft, and not debris from orbit. They are controlled vessels, intentionally maneuvered, glowing hot from their descent, and accelerating despite the friction of re-entry. I have been instructed to deliver this information with clarity and order, but I need every person listening to understand the gravity of this moment. What is happening right now is unprecedented in human history. These craft are descending in tight formations, suggesting coordination, suggesting purpose, and we fear that whatever is inside them will make landfall in mere minutes. All civilian populations are ordered to take immediate shelter. Find a basement, an interior room, any structure capable of shielding you from debris or shock waves. Bring water, bring communication devices, and stay away from windows. Do not attempt to travel. Do not attempt to flee the projected impact zones. Evacuation routes are already overwhelmed, and military authorities warn that being caught outside during descent will be far more dangerous than sheltering in place. I can hear the reports coming in faster than I can process them. Operators shouting to recalibrate radar arrays, analysts trying to predict trajectories, command centers issuing contradictory orders as they attempt to coordinate a response to something they have no blueprint for. Despite their best efforts, the craft's speed is making precise predictions nearly impossible. Still, we have assembled a preliminary list of cities expected to be hit first, based on current descent angles and thermal imaging. I will now read them, and I urge citizens in these areas to take this warning with the utmost seriousness. Projected impact zones include Los Angeles, Seattle, Phoenix, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Toronto, Mexico City, and several major metropolitan areas across Europe and Asia. These names are delivered not to cause panic, but to provide crucial seconds of preparation. Authorities emphasize that even regions not listed are at risk, as the descent patterns may change unexpectedly. Additional coordinates include Berlin, Rome, Istanbul, Mumbai, Shanghai, and Sydney. Please, if you are in or near any of these locations, take cover now. I'm going to continue with the next set of cities. Reports indicate possible descent toward Denver, Minneapolis, Houston, Vancouver, Detroit, and my own hometown of Cleveland. There is a pause here that I didn't expect to make. I've been reading these names mechanically, trying to stay detached, trying to keep my voice steady, but hearing the name of the place where my family lives, where I grew up, where people I love are listening right now, it hits differently. But I cannot break, I cannot stop. There are millions of ears on this frequency depending on clarity and composure, and I owe them every remaining ounce of stability I have. Cleveland, please. Everyone there. Seek shelter immediately. We do not know what these craft intend. We do not know if their arrival is a show of force, an invasion, or something we have not yet imagined. But the military has confirmed that these signatures match the earlier incursions associated with the entities identified as Raptoids. This is no longer speculation. This is not an isolated event. This is coordinated. This is global. I can hear my own breathing in this microphone, and I'm trying, truly trying, to steady it. But the truth is, I am just as afraid as every person listening. Yet fear must not paralyze us. Shelter buys time. Time brings information. Information brings survival. Stay where you are. protect your loved ones, and remain tuned to this frequency for further updates as long as we are able to transmit. The world is changing in this moment, and though I cannot tell you what comes next, I can tell you that you are not alone. Stay strong, stay hidden, and brace yourselves for what is coming. This is Alex Mercer reporting live, and I am standing in the middle of what can only be described as a city fraying at the edges. Evacuation routes are overflowing, families are separated in the crush of bodies, and no one seems to know where to go or what direction offers safety anymore. Emergency vehicles are trapped in the same gridlock as everyone else, their sirens swallowed by the collective roar of fear rolling through the streets. I can barely hear myself think, let alone speak, but I am trying to bring you the latest update on the situation as reports flood in from every region. People are abandoning cars in the middle of the highway, running on foot toward anything that looks like shelter. Others are shouting at officers, begging for answers the authorities simply don't have. And yet, even in the chaos, there is a grim determination in the air, a kind of shared understanding that we are all living through the same nightmare, and all we can do is endure it together. I am about to relay the most recent statement from the Emergency Council regarding the expected trajectory of the Raptoid vessels when the signal tears itself apart. My voice disappears mid-sentence. The broadcast collapses into a wall of static so violent it feels as though it vibrates inside the skull. Every frequency across the spectrum drops at once, overridden by a single incoming transmission that none of our engineers can trace. It is not a natural signal, nor is it any kind of interference our equipment has recorded before. It rises in pitch, then sinks into a deep, slow pulse that thuds like a living heartbeat. Embedded inside it is a pattern of clicks and guttural vibrations that form no human language, yet carry the weight of deliberate communication. It feels intelligent, intentional, ancient. The studio falls silent around me as the sound fills every speaker, every device, every piece of technology capable of transmitting audio. Even the background noise of the city seems to hush beneath it, as though the world itself is listening to something it was never meant to hear. I can sense people stopping in the streets, looking up, frozen by the instinctive terror that comes from recognizing a predator's voice without understanding the words. On screens across the world, symbols begin to appear. Cold geometric shapes, sharp-angled, stark white against black backgrounds. They flash in precise repetition, looping as though part of a sequence or command. Each symbol feels like it means something we can't decode, something that stirs an uncomfortable knowing in the deepest part of the mind. Around me, technicians murmur to each other, voices trembling, and then I hear someone mutter what we are all afraid to say aloud. They've hijacked everything. Every broadcast, every satellite, every channel, ours, foreign networks, even closed-loop emergency systems. The Raptoids are overriding all of it without effort, without resistance. And as the alien pulse grows louder, the city outside erupts. People scream in the streets, some dropping to their knees with hands over their ears, others running in wild panic as the wail of emergency sirens clashes violently with the alien signal. The two sounds twist together into an unbearable cacophony that makes the air feel heavy and poisoned. There is no message translated for us, no reassurance, no demands we can understand, but the intent is unmistakable. This is their voice, their presence imposed on our world in a single crushing moment. The Raptoids are not hiding in shadows anymore. They are not striking from above unseen. They are speaking directly to humanity, announcing themselves in a language that needs no words to convey dominance. This is not a warning. This is not negotiation. This is a declaration, one forced upon every living ear on the planet. And as the symbols keep flashing, as the heartbeat thrum rattles through every broadcast, humanity is left with no choice but to listen. This is Alex Mercer reporting with an update that I wish I didn't have to deliver. The 1st Defensive Battalion, the unit tasked with holding the initial line against the Raptoid incursion, has fallen silent. Communication with them has been completely lost, and the last transmissions paint a scene that is impossible to convey without the weight of fear pressing down on every word. Lieutenant Harper, stationed in a forward bunker just behind the front line, was providing a live update when the signal began to fracture under the strain of the chaos around her. She described the soldiers' encounters with creatures that moved faster than any human could track, their limbs tipped with claws, their movements predatory, precise, and utterly inhuman. The sounds reported over the channel were indescribable, shrill, guttural screams that seemed to carry through the air like a physical force, making even the hardened troops hesitate. She spoke of men and women struggling to maintain formation, throwing everything they had at beings that did not respond like normal targets, beings that seemed almost to anticipate their every move. And then, in a moment that no broadcast could ever capture fully, her voice broke as she admitted that her own brother had been stationed at the front line, that he might already be lost in the carnage. The human element, the fragile connection we cling to, was raw and exposed in that admission, and it struck a chord with every person listening as the lieutenant fought to continue, trying to remain professional even as fear and despair seeped into every word. The sounds behind her were almost unbearable. Gunfire echoed through the bunker in irregular bursts, punctuated by distant crashes that suggested structures collapsing under assault. Explosions rattled the walls, sending clouds of dust and the smell of scorched concrete through the air. Orders came through the intercom, terse and urgent, instructing her to move deeper into the tunnels to preserve what personnel could still survive. Every moment above ground was a gamble, and the lieutenant's hesitation was audible. Her careful breathing a testament to the terror that no amount of military training could entirely suppress. She described, almost clinically, the overwhelming force of the Raptoids, their relentless advance, the impossibility of predicting their movements, the futility of trying to repel them with conventional weaponry. She tried to reassure anyone listening that evacuation and regrouping were still possible. But the crack in her voice betrayed the truth we all feared. The battalion was being systematically overrun. Every floor they held, every barricade they reinforced, was being erased by creatures that refused to follow any human logic. And in the final moments of the transmission, before the signal died entirely, she issued a last report that can only be described as a message from the edge of a collapsing world. The Raptoids had breached the front line completely. They were no longer attacking in isolated pockets. They were sweeping the position clean, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Then the connection was gone. The broadcast ended abruptly, leaving a vacuum so complete it seemed to press down on the minds of those listening. There was no sound to measure the destruction, no voices to confirm what had survived, no distant gunfire to suggest resistance. The silence itself carried meaning, and it was unbearable. The first line of human defense, the soldiers we relied on to hold back the initial tide, had been overwhelmed, and now the consequences of that collapse were immediate and terrifying. Humanity is left exposed, staring into a void, without information, without reassurance, without hope of knowing the fate of those on the front lines. Lieutenant Harper's final words, her broken tone and trembling admission, linger in every ear and every mind. The battle we believed we could contain is already lost in its opening hours, and whatever comes next will meet a world that is more vulnerable, more fragile, and more terrified than it has ever been. There is no precedent for this. There is no instruction manual. There is only the Raptoids, the silence they leave behind, and the knowledge that the first line has fallen. This is Alex Mercer with WNXR, bringing you a report from the White House that has already begun unraveling in ways none of us could have anticipated. The broadcast opened to the sound of reporters practically slamming against the doors of the briefing room, a frantic rush of bodies fighting for any chance to demand answers from an administration that has been silent for far too long. When the doors finally opened, the atmosphere inside was suffocating. A government spokesperson, pale, exhausted, his suit wrinkled and speckled with what looked like dust from collapsed plaster, stepped slowly up to the podium as though each step cost him strength he no longer possessed. He gripped the edges of the lectern like a man trying to steady himself on a deck in a storm. His eyes scanned the room full of raised hands and desperate faces, and in that moment it was clear he had no comfort to offer, no confidence to project. His voice wavered as he began to speak, and he admitted what many had feared but few dared articulate. The attacks reported in suburban neighborhoods, the disappearances, the shredded vehicles and collapsed homes, were not the work of wild animals or violent criminals. They were direct assaults by Raptoid ground forces. He said it plainly, as if the weight of trying to conceal the truth had finally broken him, and the room fell into a stunned, chilling silence that drowned out even the constant buzzing of malfunctioning lights above. He tried to continue, reading from a printed statement that shook in his hands, but it was clear even to those watching from afar that he was struggling. The lights flickered repeatedly from ongoing power failures across the Capitol, casting the room into momentary darkness before sputtering back to life. Each flicker made him pause, swallow hard, and gather himself again, as if he feared the next outage might plunge them into something far worse than blackout. He spoke of containment efforts collapsing, of emergency services overwhelmed, of satellite feeds showing multiple Raptoid formations moving in coordinated paths toward densely populated regions. He insisted there was still a plan, that the government was mobilizing every remaining resource, that help was being sent to affected areas as quickly as possible. But his tone betrayed him. The words came out thin, hollow, stripped of conviction. When he reached the line meant to reassure the nation, "We will survive this," it sounded less like a promise and more like a plea, a line he had been ordered to read but no longer believed himself. The reporters didn't cheer or applaud or challenge him. They simply stared, realizing that even the officials at the podium had lost faith in the systems they were sworn to defend. When the spokesperson finally stepped away from the podium, he moved as if he had aged decades in the span of minutes. The room erupted into shouts and questions, but he didn't turn back. He didn't even attempt to answer. He just walked off stage, shoulders slumped, eyes distant. And then came the moment that froze the entire nation. His microphone, still live, captured his quiet, despairing mumble as he thought he was out of earshot. "We're losing everything," he said, softly, almost to himself, but unmistakable. The words echoed across every speaker, every radio, every emergency channel connected to the broadcast. For a brief second, no one said anything. No one moved. Those 4 words cut through the official narrative more sharply than any Raptoid attack could. Because it wasn't rumor or speculation or fear-mongering. It was the truth slipping out from behind the government's last crumbling mask of control. And now, as citizens across the country listen to that accidental confession, the nation faces a reality that can no longer be softened, hidden, or denied. Humanity is losing ground, losing structure, losing time. And the people in power know it. This is Alex Mercer, and what I'm about to share with you is unfolding in real time before my eyes. I'm standing with our field correspondent, Daniel Klein, who has climbed to the rooftop of a mid-rise building in the downtown sector. And the city below us is collapsing into darkness faster than anyone can comprehend. Block by block, district by district, the lights are dying. One moment, an entire neighborhood glows in the familiar warmth of street lamps and windows. And the next, it's swallowed by a void so complete it looks carved out of reality. Daniel is gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles have turned white, his breath shaky as he tries to narrate the catastrophe with the precision expected of a journalist. But his voice trembles every time another substation goes dark. It's happening too quickly, like dominoes falling, each failure triggering the next, until the entire electrical grid is unraveling across the horizon. In the distance we can see flashes of orange and white, the unmistakable burst of explosions ripping through power facilities. Daniel describes shocking, jagged silhouettes darting among them, moving with purpose, tearing through transformers and emergency relays as if they were paper. These are Raptoid ground forces, striking infrastructure with chilling accuracy. Their attacks not chaotic, but targeted, strategic, coordinated to plunge the city into total helplessness. Generator backups across the urban core are struggling to stay alive, humming weakly, flickering like dying candles, each light desperately fighting against the rising dark. Helicopters sweep across the sky, their searchlights slicing through great black voids where entire districts once stood illuminated. The beams drift over collapsed towers, deserted intersections, and the eerie glow of distant fires where emergency crews are still trying to hold their ground. The choppers are flying low, patched into the last working communication channels, their pilots calling out sightings of Raptoid movement while trying to avoid ground-based attacks. From the rooftop, rain begins to fall. Cold, heavy droplets that smack against metal vents and broken glass, turning the whole city into a glistening expanse of shadows. Lightning flashes somewhere far off, illuminating the skyline for a split second, enough for Daniel to catch glimpses of something crawling over the remains of an electrical tower before the world snaps back to darkness. His voice cracks as he continues, his attempts at objectivity eroding under the weight of what he's witnessing. He tells our listeners that people are stumbling through pitch-black streets below us, guided only by the fading pulse of generator lights, trying to reach shelters they can no longer see. The storm grows heavier, soaking through his jacket, and he shivers as he leans closer to the mic, his voice dropping to a fragile whisper. He tells us he used to look up from this same rooftop on calm nights and admire the stars stretching across the sky like a promise. Then there's a long pause, one filled with the distant echo of destruction and the suffocating quiet of a city losing its heartbeat. And finally, with the rain running down his face, he murmurs, barely holding himself together, "I can't see the stars anymore." Those words linger in the static, and for a moment neither of us speaks. The blackout has swallowed the sky as completely as it has the streets, leaving nothing above us but darkness and the silhouettes of circling helicopters cutting brief, trembling arcs of light. The city feels abandoned by the heavens themselves. And as the grid collapses further, as more explosions tear through the outer districts and the storm intensifies, Daniel's final whispered confession becomes a symbol of what we are all experiencing in this moment. Not just the loss of power, but the loss of certainty, the loss of safety, the loss of the familiar world we once knew. Humanity is listening from the dark, and the Raptoids are tightening their grip, one blackout at a time. This is Alex Mercer reporting, and we are joined now by a geologist who has been monitoring the seismic activity that has shaken multiple regions over the past 48 hours. His name is Dr. Rowan Hale, and he is standing beside me with a tremor in his hands he can't seem to control. He arrived at the studio insisting that the quakes we'd been attributing to shifting tectonic plates were not natural events at all. His voice cracks as he explains that the signatures were wrong from the beginning. Too rhythmic, too patterned, too hollow at their core to be caused by ordinary geological processes. He says the quakes came from beneath urban centers, suburbs, rural plains, even mountain regions, all sharing the same unnatural pulse, and each one followed by strange electromagnetic distortions. As he speaks, his eyes are wide and unfocused, as though he's reliving the exact moment he and his colleagues realized the truth. The ground had not been shifting. It had been opening. Tunnels, he says, massive, interwoven, engineered tunnels carved with impossible precision deep within the earth. And the moment he says it, the feed switches to live drone footage that makes every hair on my body stand on end. The earth is splitting open in jagged lines, long fissures cracking through soil and stone, revealing cavernous hollows below. From these wounds in the ground spill glowing patterns, strange pulsating forms of bioluminescence that trace the interior walls like veins illuminated from within. The cameras drift lower, revealing something far more terrifying rising through the glow. Shapes begin to ascend from the tunnels, first silhouettes, then bodies emerging into full view as they reach open air. They are tall, impossibly tall, moving with a speed and fluidity that defies anatomy as we understand it. Their limbs are elongated, jointed at angles that seem wrong for anything born on Earth. The skin, if it can be called that, shimmers with the same eerie glow as the patterns etched into the tunnels, as though whatever energy powers those structures runs through the creatures themselves. Then the first one opens its jaw, a long, narrow maw lined with jagged teeth, and unleashes a screech that shatters whatever fragile composure the watching crowd might have had. The noise cuts through the night sky like a blade, echoing through city streets, bouncing off buildings, rattling windows. People who had gathered nearby, hoping to understand what was happening, begin to run in blind terror. Their screams rise in chaotic waves as more of the creatures crawl out. Dozens, maybe hundreds, clawing at the ground with sharp, curved talons, shaking off dust and debris as they adjust to the surface world they've long been hidden from. Dr. Hale watches the footage with his hands pressed to his mouth, tears beginning to roll down his cheeks. He chokes as he tries to speak again, trying to form sentences that keep dissolving into stammered fragments. He explains that the patterns, the tunnels, the unnatural vibrations, all of it suggests that these structures beneath our feet weren't improvised or recently made. They had been there for generations, perhaps centuries, carved by beings who have been studying us from below, waiting, preparing, nesting in the deep places of the world we never dared to explore. His voice drops to a broken whisper as he confesses that the scientific community dismissed countless anomalies, unexplained readings, and strange subterranean voids because no one wanted to consider the possibility that something intelligent and hostile was living beneath us. The drone feed zooms in closer on one of the fissures, catching the moment another Raptoid climbs into view, its eyes reflecting the light like cold amber fire. The creature lifts its head to the sky, sniffing, listening, perhaps sensing the vibrations of the terrified crowds fleeing above. And then Dr. Hale crumples in the middle of his explanation, his entire body shaking as he utters the words that cut deeper than any data point ever could. We were standing above them all this time. Those words reverberate through the broadcast with a weight that even the chaos outside cannot drown out. The realization settles over the audience, over the studio, over the world. The Raptoids were never arriving. They were awakening. They were never invaders from the sky. They were neighbors buried in the dark, waiting for the moment humanity would finally hear them. And now that they have emerged, the surface is no longer ours alone. The ground beneath our feet has become a doorway, and what comes out of it changes everything we thought we understood about the threat we face. The cities above are panicking. The tunnels below are glowing, and the creatures rising from the depths are moving with terrifying purpose into a world that never knew it was built atop their domain. This is Alex Mercer coming to you live across every available frequency as the world descends into a crisis, unlike anything humanity has ever faced. And I warn you now, the scale of what I am about to describe may be impossible to fully comprehend, but it is real, it is happening, and it is happening everywhere. Just hours ago, the President addressed the nation in a broadcast that will be remembered for the gravity of every word, confirming that the strange sightings, the violent attacks, the unexplained disappearances across suburban and urban areas were not caused by rogue human forces, not experimental weapons, not natural disasters, but by a species previously unknown to the public, a species called the Raptoids, beings our government had known about for decades, but never expected would strike openly. And as the President spoke, his voice trembling with exhaustion and fear, admitting that major cities were already falling and communication networks might fail at any moment, the world held its collective breath, realizing that the nightmare once confined to speculation and conspiracy had become a horrifying reality. And almost immediately, the emergency alert system blared across every channel, long, dreadful tones echoing through the silence, followed by a stern military voice confirming that multiple unknown craft had broken through the upper atmosphere, glowing hot and descending with impossible speed, while radar operators shouted in panic and civilians were instructed to take immediate shelter wherever possible, even as reports from the ground indicated that highways, bridges, and supposed evacuation routes were already being overrun, collapsing under the relentless onslaught of the Raptoids, and families across the globe huddled around radios, clutching children in dimly lit basements, listening to trembling operators struggling to maintain composure, voices breaking under the weight of the explosions and gunfire rocking the streets, one operator whispering to a mother, "Mom, if you hear this, I love you," before the feed abruptly went dead, leaving nothing but silence and the realization that the Raptoids' assault had reached every corner of the world at once. In the cities, the destruction escalated with terrifying speed. Entire districts went dark as power grids were systematically attacked, One blackout following another like falling dominoes, explosions erupting in electrical facilities, while backup generators hummed weakly against the void. Helicopters swept across the night sky, searchlights slicing through streets swallowed by darkness. Rain began to fall, cold and heavy, drenching terrified citizens, and reporters atop rooftops struggled to narrate what they were witnessing, voices cracking as they admitted to the world, "I can't see the stars anymore," as the familiar constellations vanished beneath the smoke, fire, and darkness. While beneath the ground, the nightmare continued. Geologists confirming that recent quakes were not natural, but the movement of vast Raptoid tunnels, long hidden networks opening beneath cities to release creatures glowing with bioluminescent patterns, crawling up fissures, tall, fast, reptilian, screeching into the night as panicked crowds fled, their screams mixing with the thunder of collapsing buildings, rolling fires, and the relentless beating of rain against concrete. On the front lines, humanity's defenses were failing, even as we tried to monitor them. Communication with the 1st Defensive Battalions went silent, and the last transmission from a trembling lieutenant described soldiers encountering multiple silhouettes, moving faster than any human could track. Clawed limbs tearing through barricades, inhuman shrieks echoing across the battlefield, her voice breaking as she mentioned that her own brother had been stationed there. Gunfire erupting behind her as officers ordered retreat into deeper tunnels, and then nothing. Silence as the Raptoids overwhelmed positions once thought defensible, leaving only the void where resistance had been attempted. Evacuation orders continued to cascade across every major population center, sirens wailing in unison as operators guided the public toward highways, shelters, and designated safe zones, all while reports filtered in that streets were already overrun, that evacuation corridors were blocked, that families were being forced to flee blindly, children crying in the darkness, and even the operators themselves were unable to maintain composure under the assault, whispering fragile confessions to loved ones over live channels before the feeds cut, leaving only silence and the terrifying knowledge that nowhere was truly safe. From above and below, the Raptoids asserted control. Live footage showed fissures glowing beneath city streets, tunnels releasing creatures at unimaginable speed, their claws tearing through concrete and asphalt, bioluminescent patterns tracing the walls of their lairs and running along their bodies like veins of cold fire, while humans scattered, trapped, screaming, as the Raptoids claimed the surface with deliberate, terrifying efficiency. And yet above that, the cities burned and blacked out, explosions shaking the skyline, helicopters dipping low to illuminate streets that no longer offered safe passage, rain streaking across every window, and reporters narrating the collapse, their voices cracking, their eyes wide with fear, revealing to the world in real time the scale of humanity's unpreparedness, the fragility of our defenses, the utter dominance of this species we had ignored for far too long. Even the White House could not provide solace. A pale, exhausted spokesperson stepped to the podium under flickering lights, admitting that suburban attacks were not animal attacks, but direct assaults by Raptoid ground forces, struggling to read prepared statements, promising, "We will survive," with no belief in the words themselves, walking off only to mutter into a live microphone, "We're losing everything," a statement that carried across the world, echoing in every heart already aware of the scale of the collapse. Humanity is now forced to endure the reality of the invasion on every level, from the skies streaked with descending craft, to the streets plunged into darkness, to the underground tunnels disgorging predators into the night, to the crumbling military defenses, to the desperation of families clinging to fading radios. to the rain-soaked rooftops where reporters watch the collapse of familiar worlds, to the blacked-out cities that can no longer see the stars. Every system, every broadcast, every attempt at coordination is being hijacked, overridden, consumed, leaving humans to witness, to listen, to survive on instinct as civilization itself is torn apart in real time, and the message could not be clearer. The Raptoids are here. They are organized. They are everywhere. And humanity's only chance is to endure, to hide, to flee, and to hope that some fragment of the world remains once the darkness has passed. This is Alex Mercer reporting live across all frequencies, and the reports flooding in now are beyond anything we have ever seen or imagined. A tide of terror that confirms with horrifying clarity that the Raptoids are not only here, but are actively hunting and overwhelming human forces with precision, speed, and intelligence that defies comprehension. As countless civilians call into our broadcast line with voices shaking so violently, it is almost impossible to understand their words. Fragments of screams, gasps, and sobs interspersed with descriptions of creatures moving in ways no human could match. One terrified caller recounting how a massive figure leapt effortlessly over an armored convoy, clearing multiple vehicles in a single bound, landing between soldiers and vehicles with terrifying grace. Its movements fluid, deliberate, inhuman, while another caller insists they saw a pair of eyes glowing in the darkness, amber and reflective, fixed on them, following every motion, every flicker of light, and seeming to measure their fear as if it were food. And as these reports pour in, we hear in the background the faint but unmistakable sounds of combat, gunfire crackling, explosions rocking the distance, shouting that cuts through the line like a knife, the metallic clatter of overturned vehicles, sirens wailing, the chaos of a world under siege from a predator that outmatches every defense humanity has ever constructed. Moments later, a soldier calls in, his breathing ragged, words hurried and uneven as he describes his unit being torn apart, comrades falling in seconds, their armor shredded, rifles useless against something with claws that cut through steel and reinforced plating as if it were paper, his voice breaking as he tries to identify what is happening around him. Gunfire echoing through the channel, the screams of the injured blending with the mechanical sounds of collapsing equipment and vehicles, until mid-transmission, a piercing, agonized scream cuts across the line, raw, primal, a sound that freezes the blood, and before anyone can react, the feed collapses into static, leaving an eerie silence that is deafening, a silence that fills every listener with a profound and almost physical dread. The sudden disappearance of his voice confirming what everyone already fears. These creatures are unstoppable. They strike faster than we can respond, and they are systematically dismantling every human defense in sight, leaving nothing intact, nothing predictable and nowhere safe, as if the world itself has become a hunting ground for beings that were always beneath, around, and now fully among us. And yet the horror does not end there, because reports continue to flood in from all directions, each more horrifying than the last. A group of soldiers in a suburban district taken in moments, their radios crackling as screams pierce the night. Civilians witnessing figures vaulting over buildings, sprinting across streets with a terrifying speed, their glowing eyes cutting through smoke, shadows, and darkness alike, hunting indiscriminately, calculating movements, coordinating strikes with a level of intelligence that suggests this is not merely a random attack, but a deliberate, strategic invasion. And through it all, our operators on the line are forced to maintain composure, relaying whatever they can to listeners while their own voices tremble, repeating instructions, shouting warnings over the chaotic sounds of battle, sometimes breaking down mid-sentence, whispering personal confessions of fear and love, humanizing the terror as much as it humanizes the stakes, all while the creatures advance, faster than roads can clear, faster than any military formation can respond, faster than hope itself can be sustained. The reports describe soldiers caught in open streets, falling in seconds as Raptoids leap over vehicles, tear through barricades, drag comrades screaming into alleys and shadows, and disappear, leaving chaos and blood in their wake. Witnesses unable to look away, hearts pounding, unable to comprehend how something so fast, so intelligent, so deadly could exist on Earth. And still more reports describe the creatures emerging from unexpected places. Sewers, collapsed tunnels, abandoned buildings, glowing under flickering streetlights as their eyes track fleeing humans, moving in synchronized predatory patterns that suggest planning, that suggest an understanding of the chaos they are creating, of the terror they are inflicting. And as each new report comes in, the world listening feels it all. The gunfire, the screams, the rain on rooftops, the smoke and fire, the darkness swallowing familiar streets and familiar faces, the sense of being hunted from every direction, from above, below, and all around. And then the inevitable silence follows each transmission, static replacing human voices, punctuating the terror in a way that no words could, leaving listeners staring into the unknown, the empty void carrying the weight of what has been lost, of friends, comrades, entire units, entire districts gone, snatched into the hands of beings faster, stronger, more intelligent than we are, beings who do not hesitate, who do not tire, who do not sleep, and who have turned the world into their hunting ground, leaving humanity scrambling, hiding, running, trying to survive in the gaps of their advance. And with every passing minute, the scale of the destruction becomes clearer, the reports converging into a single, horrifying narrative. The Raptoids are everywhere. They are unstoppable, and survival depends not on strength, not on courage, not on preparation, but on instinct, luck, and the desperate hope that somehow, one might avoid being the next target in a world that has already been irrevocably changed. This is Alex Mercer reporting live, and the feed has just switched to NASA's command center, where the atmosphere is thick with fear, panic, and disbelief, and the tension in the room is almost tangible as satellite images unfold across massive monitors, revealing something so staggering that even seasoned scientists are struggling to maintain composure. Massive crescent-shaped Raptoid ships are moving into position around the planet with deliberate precision, forming a vast, unbroken planetary net. A containment grid that stretches from horizon to horizon in multiple orbital layers, each craft enormous, sleek, and alien, dwarfing every human satellite ever launched, their glowing surfaces reflecting sunlight like ominous eyes in the darkness of space. And as the NASA operator narrates the feed, her voice trembling and uneven, she struggles to describe the scale, the coordination, and the horrifying intent of these beings, explaining that the ships are not merely patrolling or observing. They are strategically positioning themselves to block every conceivable exit, to cut off every escape route, to ensure that no human effort, no fleet, no spacecraft, no satellite could bypass the perimeter they are establishing. And with every word she utters, the fear in her voice grows. a thin tremor betraying the magnitude of what is unfolding. While behind her, the room is a storm of emotion, scientists arguing in panicked whispers, others crying openly, some kneeling and praying, some clutching each other as if that could somehow anchor them against the overwhelming reality they are witnessing. And the imagery on the monitors only amplifies the terror. The crescent-shaped vessels shift in perfect synchronization, forming a lattice that encircles the Earth like the jaws of a predator. Every rotation, every adjustment precise, calculated, suggesting intelligence and intent beyond human comprehension. An understanding of the planet and its inhabitants that is cold, methodical, and terrifyingly effective. And as she whispers, almost to herself, "This isn't an attack. It's a takeover." The weight of those words hangs in the air, heavy and suffocating, a chilling confirmation that humanity is not simply under siege but being strategically contained, trapped on its own planet, watched and assessed by forces beyond anything we have ever encountered. And as she speaks, monitors flicker with multiple perspectives. The curvature of the Earth dotted with the shadowed outlines of the massive ships, their arrangement forming a perfect cage over major population centers, over oceans, over deserts, over every possible avenue of escape, and every viewer, every listener, feels the gravity of it, the suffocating realization that the Raptoids are no longer content to strike at isolated cities or territories. They are orchestrating a global, planetary-scale domination, and the implications are inescapable, devastating, terrifying. Behind her, the sound of broken sobs, murmured prayers, whispered apologies to loved ones, frantic shuffling, and shouted commands fill the room. The human response to witnessing an incomprehensible power. And as she struggles to continue the narration, her words faltering under the weight of what she is describing, suddenly the feed cuts. Monitors flicker to black, and the room falls into a tense, suffocating silence, leaving every listener, every viewer, every station tuned in to realize that this is no longer a moment of observation, but of inescapable reality, that the Raptoids have now achieved orbital dominance, that Earth itself is encircled, contained, and observed by a species whose reach, speed, and coordination humanity cannot hope to match. And in that silence, with the images gone and only the echoes of broken voices and trembling operators remaining, the stark, horrifying truth settles over everyone like a physical weight. The Raptoids are not simply attacking. They are taking control, asserting ownership, transforming the planet into a hunting ground, a cage, a world no longer under human dominion, leaving billions below staring into the sky, into space, and into a future that is suddenly alien, terrifying, and inescapably theirs. This is Alex Mercer coming to you live. And what we are witnessing in the Global Communications Center right now is a collapse of hope so profound, it feels like the air itself has thickened, pressing down on every chest in the room, because after hours, no, days, of relentless work, of scientists poring over the distorted alien broadcast that has been searing through every radio frequency on Earth, they have finally managed to decode fragments of the Raptoid signal. And the moment the translation appears across the screens, a suffocating silence washes over the entire facility. A silence that lasts only seconds before shattering into chaos. Because the decoded message is brutally simple, stripped of nuance, stripped of any hint of negotiation or possibility. This planet belongs to us, written in jagged alien glyphs that seem almost alive as they pulse on the monitors, and the lead scientist, an older man with shaking hands and dark circles under his eyes, someone who has barely slept since the first signal was captured, steps up to the mic with a stack of papers that immediately slip from his grip and scatter across the floor. His composure breaking as he tries to read, his voice trembling so hard the first few words are unintelligible, and then he stumbles forward, gripping the edge of the console as if holding himself up against the weight of the message, apologizing over and over, whispering that he had hoped, truly hoped, that the broadcast contained some plea for coexistence, or an offer of diplomacy, or even a warning of misunderstanding. Anything that might have left humanity a sliver of a future where negotiation was possible. But as he stares at the glowing alien phrase on the screen, he can barely force the words out. All it contains is a claim and a warning. His voice cracks, the sound raw and human and devastating, and the second he says it, the room erupts. Scientists shouting over one another, some slamming keyboards, others stumbling away from their stations in tears, hands covering their mouths as if they are physically trying to stop themselves from screaming. A few dropping to their knees as they stare at the screens, whispering prayers or curses or desperate denials. Cables rip from their ports as consoles flicker under the strain of the incoming alien signal. Monitors flash white and red with repeating symbols, and the alien message pulses louder through the speakers, a rhythmic, metallic thrum that vibrates through the floor and into the bones of everyone present, growing in volume as if the Raptoids know they've been understood and are now amplifying their claim for the entire planet to hear. And through all of this, our broadcast team is desperately trying to hold the line. Voices raised over the blaring hum, begging listeners, pleading with them to stay calm, to stay safe, to take shelter anywhere they can, even though the tremble in their words betrays their own rising terror. Because as the decoded message fills the air, as the alien signal grows louder, deeper, resonating like a predator's growl echoing through the dark, every person in the room, every person listening across cities, shelters, basements, darkened apartments, knows with a chilling certainty that the Raptoids are not only declaring ownership, they are enforcing it. And the world, shaking under their advance, is being forced to listen. This is Alex Mercer reporting live as the world witnesses a historic yet horrifying event. A joint emergency session of the United Nations has been convened in response to the Raptoid invasion. And for the first time, the leaders of nearly every major nation have appeared simultaneously on global broadcasts, each in their own makeshift command centers, bunkers, and secure locations, exhausted, pale, and visibly terrified, faces lined with stress and sleepless nights, eyes darting to monitors as explosions shake the buildings they occupy, the walls rattling, papers sliding off desks, alarms blaring in the background. And yet they speak, struggling to project calm, to reassure the billions of people listening that the world is attempting some form of coordinated response, even as their voices betray the gravity of the situation, some faltering mid-sentence, some pausing to catch a ragged breath as distant booms echo in the corridors behind them, one leader's feed cutting out entirely without warning, leaving only a frozen, flickering image as the sound of structural collapse echoes faintly through the audio channel, while another leader fights to hold back tears, her voice cracking as she implores humanity to stand together, to unite across borders, cultures, and languages, to recognize that the Raptoids are not merely a threat to individual nations, but to every city, every family, every human being on Earth. And as she speaks, the camera shakes slightly with each distant explosion, her hands gripping the edge of the podium as if bracing against the invisible force of the attack. The microphone picking up every creak, every thud, every frightened murmur behind her as staff attempt to maintain order, and the effect on viewers and listeners is immediate and visceral. A sense of shared vulnerability so profound that millions of people feel it as a physical weight pressing down on their chests. Across split screens, other world leaders add their voices to the broadcast, some speaking from bunkers deep underground, others from commandeered command rooms filled with blinking monitors and maps, some with advisors whispering urgently into earpieces, all attempting to coordinate responses even as reports of Raptoid activity flood in, reports of cities under fire, evacuation routes cut off, soldiers and civilians alike falling to creatures moving faster and striking harder than anything previously known. While the human leaders' words attempt to impose structure and hope on a world already unraveling, their statements repeating a single terrifying confirmation. The Raptoids are hostile, their aggression global, their coordination methodical, and humanity's defenses are failing everywhere simultaneously. And even as they speak, more explosions echo through the live feeds. Lights flicker, dust falls from ceilings, papers scatter, staff duck for cover. And yet the leaders continue, one struggling to maintain composure as tears silently track down her cheeks, another pausing repeatedly to clear his throat, voice barely above a whisper as he lists cities already under siege, casualties mounting, communications severed, and the hopelessness in their faces is mirrored by the tension in the millions watching from homes, shelters, basements, and streets, listening to the sound of fear transmitted not only through words, but through every subtle cue, the shakiness of a hand on a podium, the tremble in a voice, the distant thrum of explosions, the whisper of panic from staff, the abrupt flicker and distortion of a camera feed, as if the broadcast itself cannot contain the scale of the terror. And as the session continues, the leaders coordinate what little remains of global strategy, their discussion a tense, fragmented stream of contingency plans, evacuation efforts, military deployments, and warnings to civilians, punctuated by the constant, unmistakable interruptions of distant bombardments, gunfire, collapsing structures, alarms, and the faint, eerie hum that has become the background signature of the Raptoid presence, creating a layered, immersive sense of chaos that overwhelms both speaker and listener alike. The words of reassurance battling against the audio reality of total war unfolding on Earth's surface, while advisors whisper urgently in multiple languages. Pages flip frantically as maps are consulted and discarded, and the audience senses the pressure on every individual in the room, the collective knowledge that they are watching the unraveling of civilization in real time. Finally, one leader, her voice breaking, leans closer to the camera, whispering almost to herself and almost to the world. Humanity must stand together. A plea as fragile as it is powerful, and for a fleeting moment, it feels like a rallying cry. But even as it resonates, the ambient sounds of destruction never cease. The distant rumble of collapsing buildings, the echo of artillery or Raptoid strikes, the occasional panicked shout, the faint scurry of staff attempting to maintain operations, all forming a terrifying counterpoint to her words, reminding everyone that unity, while necessary, may not be enough to withstand the force they are now facing. And then, almost abruptly, the broadcast ends, cutting to black across all screens, leaving a haunting silence that is heavier than any explosion, deeper than any scream, a silence filled with the cumulative knowledge of millions watching and listening that the Raptoids are hostile, that they are advancing, that the world's leaders are exhausted and terrified, that humanity is on its own, and in that silence, stretched across every home, every shelter, every listening station. The weight of global panic, fear, and uncertainty hangs palpably, leaving nothing but the terrifying realization that the planet itself has become a battlefield, and that the people of Earth have never been more aware of how utterly unprepared, how fragile, and how exposed they truly are to an enemy that does not sleep, does not negotiate, and will not relent. This is Alex Mercer, and what we are receiving now may be the last human transmission, a fragile, desperate signal carried across the airwaves through static, interference, and the relentless roar of distant artillery and collapsing structures. The voice of a lone radio operator barely audible over the cacophony, speaking from somewhere deep in the dark heart of the world's collapse. A place where shadows are thick and movement is uncertain, where walls shake from explosions outside and the floor vibrates with each distant impact. And as he begins to speak, his breathing is heavy, ragged, almost shaking through the microphone. Each inhalation a reminder of the struggle to survive. And yet despite the terror, he forces words into the air, describing the unimaginable devastation around him. All major defense lines have fallen. Cities thought impregnable are consumed by fire, smoke, and alien predators. Military units scattered, destroyed, or captured, leaving nothing but rubble, shattered streets, abandoned vehicles, and the occasional eerie flicker of lights from survivors trying to hide. And the soundscape of his surroundings is a symphony of apocalypse. Metal tearing and folding, distant artillery pounding incessantly, glass shattering in the wind, alarms wailing intermittently, the screaming of civilians echoing faintly through corridors and streets, some calls for help fading into silence, some screams swallowed by the roar of Raptoid attacks, and the creatures themselves can almost be heard through the static, the scraping of claws on concrete, the screeches that pierce the night like knives, the thrum of their movement, precise, coordinated, utterly inhuman, advancing in waves that seem unstoppable, overwhelming every barricade, every soldier, every defense humanity has relied upon, and through it all, the operator's voice strains, but persists, painting a picture in words of what humanity is facing in real time, describing perimeter breaches where Raptoids surge over walls, tear through remaining defenses, and consume everything in their path. His words interrupted by the sounds of battle encroaching ever closer. Nearby shouts, screams, footsteps running over debris, and the occasional muffled explosion that rattles the very microphone through which he speaks. Yet even amidst the terror, there is a human note, fragile but resolute, as he whispers, barely audible, "If anyone's still listening, don't give up. Keep fighting. Survive. Somehow." Each word carrying the weight of every human heart still clinging to life. And as he continues, we hear faint background voices, some calling for help, some praying, some sobbing, some shouting instructions to others, but each fading into the overwhelming chaos, swallowed by the advancing Raptoids, until the operator's tone becomes more urgent, more desperate, describing in vivid, horrifying detail how the creatures are moving through every corridor, every street, every tunnel with terrifying coordination, ripping through barricades, scaling walls, hunting survivors like prey, faster than any human response could keep up with. And the static intermittently cuts in, adding a layer of disorientation, making the listener strain to hear, to grasp, to comprehend the scale of what is happening, the scale of humanity being overwhelmed, cities falling one after another, towns disappearing from contact, communications failing, All while the operator continues to describe fleeting human acts of courage, soldiers holding for seconds, civilians dragging children to hidden corners, fleeting attempts to fight back with whatever is at hand, the faint echo of gunfire, explosions, barricades being erected and immediately torn down, and all of it painted over by the unstoppable, terrifying advance of the Raptoid swarm. The sound of their roars, screeches, and clawing punctuating every attempt at human resistance, until at last, a massive crash, a building collapsing, a heavy structure giving way, something enormous hitting metal, rips through the feed, drowning his words, and the final transmission dissolves into static and alien roars, leaving only silence, broken intermittently by the faintest echoes of screams, a silence so heavy it feels physical, pressing down on every listener, conveying more horror than any words could. And in that silence, the terrifying reality crystallizes. The Raptoids have claimed the battlefield, the planet itself, and whatever remains of humanity is left in the shadows, scattered, hidden, forced to survive in a world that no longer belongs to them, with only this fleeting, broken, desperate voice as a reminder that for a moment, someone tried to speak for all of us, tried to send hope across the airwaves, tried to remind us not to give up even in the face of an unstoppable, incomprehensible enemy. And as the static continues, as the roars of the Raptoids fade in and out, the weight of that last stand, the human desperation, the courage and the terror, hangs over the airwaves like a ghost, a final testament to a world irrevocably changed, a civilization forced to confront that its future is no longer in human hands, and that survival will demand more than courage. It will demand endurance against a predator that may never relent.